The massive space station orbited the gas giant Nexus Prime, like a glittering jewel against the swirling orange and purple clouds below. Every year, the greatest civilizations in the galaxy gathered here to show off their latest military technology. This wasn't just about bragging rights, it was about survival. In a universe filled with pirates, raiders, and unknown threats, everyone wanted to know who had the biggest stick. The exhibition grounds stretched for kilometers, with designated zones for each participating species. The Vorthak Empire had arrived first, as always, their colossal dreadnoughts casting shadows over smaller vessels. These ships were the size of small cities, bristling with plasma cannons and missile pods. Their hulls gleamed like polished obsidian, and when they fired their weapons during demonstrations, the energy discharges lit up space like miniature suns. Not to be outdone, the Kalari Federation brought their pride and joy, interceptor squadrons that moved like schools of silver fish through space. Their ships weren't built for raw power, but for speed and precision. Energy shields shimmered around their hulls like soap bubbles, deflecting incoming fire with elegant efficiency. When they performed their aerial ballet, weaving between obstacles, at impossible speeds, even rival species couldn't help but admire their grace. The four-armed Zenthari displayed their bioships, living vessels that could heal damage and adapt to threats in real time. The insectoid Krish brought swarm fighters that moved like angry hornets, coordinating attacks through their hive-mind connection. Even the peaceful Luminar showed up with their crystalline vessels that could bend light itself into weapons. Then, humanity arrived, and everyone stopped what they were doing to stare. The human ship looked like a mistake. The Eternal Dawn was maybe half the size of a Vorthak destroyer, and had none of the sleek elegance of Kalari design. It was boxy, utilitarian, painted in boring grey and blue. Some aliens actually chuckled when they saw it drift into the exhibition zone. What were these newcomers thinking? Bringing such an ordinary-looking vessel to compete with the galaxy's finest? Captain Jin-Ho Park stood on his bridge, watching the alien reactions through the view screen. His crew of 30 humans worked quietly at their stations, running final checks on systems that looked deceptively simple. Unlike the alien ships with their glowing displays and dramatic lighting, the Eternal Dawn's bridge was almost subdued. Clean, white walls, blue holographic displays, and the soft hum of efficient machinery. Lieutenant Hyejin Kim, his tactical officer, glanced up from her console. "Sir, we're receiving quite a bit of chatter on the alien frequencies. Most of it's not very flattering." Jin-Ho smiled slightly. "Let them think what they want. Are our systems ready?" "All green across the board, Captain. The quantum disruptors are charged, adaptive armor is active, and our defensive matrix is standing by." Around them, thousands of alien spectators had gathered on observation platforms and in smaller ships to watch the demonstrations. The Vorthak went first, obliterating a small moon with a sustained bombardment that lasted 10 minutes. The crowd cheered as chunks of rock scattered into space, glowing red-hot from the assault. The Kalari followed, their interceptors dancing through an asteroid field while picking off targets with surgical precision. Their energy beams carved through rock and metal like hot knives, leaving perfect spherical holes in their wake. Then it was humanity's turn. "Attention all observers," Jin-Ho announced over the general communication channel, his voice calm and professional. "The Terran Defense Force will now demonstrate standard defensive protocols." Standard defensive protocols. The aliens almost laughed. What could these newcomers possibly show them that they hadn't seen before? Jin-Ho nodded to his crew. "Hyejin, bring us to position. Engineering, power up the quantum array." The Eternal Dawn moved forward with surprising smoothness, approaching a series of reinforced asteroids that had been set up as targets. These weren't ordinary rocks. They'd been armored with the same materials used in military bunkers, designed to withstand prolonged bombardment. "Initiating defensive protocol demonstration," Jin-Ho announced. What happened next defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about physics. The human ship didn't fire visible beams or missiles. Instead, space itself seemed to ripple around the asteroids. The quantum disruptors created distortions in reality, tearing apart the molecular bonds that held matter together. The reinforced asteroids didn't explode. They simply ceased to exist, dissolving into their component atoms in seconds. But that was just the beginning. Other ships in the demonstration area began firing at the Eternal Dawn with practice rounds, standard procedure to test defensive capabilities. The alien observers expected to see energy shields or armor plating. Instead, they watched in stunned silence as the incoming fire struck the human ship's hull and simply vanished. The adaptive armor didn't just absorb the energy, it converted it, redirecting the power to the ship's own systems. A Vorthak plasma blast that could melt through a mountain struck the Eternal Dawn's port side and disappeared without a trace. Kalari precision beams meant to test shield strength were swallowed up by the strange human hull material. Even a Zenthari bioacid projectile, designed to eat through any known substance, dissolved harmlessly against the ship's surface. In less than 5 minutes, humanity had demonstrated technology that made the galaxy's most advanced weapons look like children's toys. The Eternal Dawn hung in space, unmarked and undamaged, while the reinforced asteroids that had withstood hours of alien bombardment were nothing but scattered atoms. The alien observers fell completely silent. Even the constant chatter of communication channels died away as the implications sank in. If humans could do this with standard defensive protocols, what could they do when they actually tried to fight? Captain Jinho Park looked out at the sea of alien ships surrounding his vessel, their weapons still smoking from the demonstration. He'd just changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever, and everyone knew it. The news traveled through hyperspace communication networks faster than any ship could fly. Within 3 hours of the human demonstration, emergency broadcasts were flooding every major star system in the galaxy. What the aliens had witnessed at Nexus Prime wasn't just impressive technology, it was a complete game-changer that threatened to upset the balance of power that had existed for thousands of years. On the desert world of Sorok Prime, the reptilian war masters gathered in their underground command bunkers. General Vextar, his scales turning a darker shade of green with stress, watched the recorded footage for the 15th time. The massive holographic display showed the human ship dissolving reinforced asteroids like they were made of sand. Run. The simulation again, he hissed to his tactical computer. The AI's response was the same as before. Probability of Sorok victory against human forces, less than 2%. Recommended action, immediate diplomatic contact or strategic withdrawal from contested territories. Vexitar's claws scraped against the metal table. The Sorok had built their reputation on being the galaxy's fiercest warriors. Their heavily armored battle cruisers had crushed every enemy they'd faced for the past century. Now their most advanced weapons appeared to be completely useless against human technology. Meanwhile, in the vast hive networks of the Krish homeworld, millions of insectoid minds worked as one to process the threat. The hive queens communicated through chemical signals that rippled through their underground colonies like waves. Their strength had always been in numbers, sending thousands of small fighters to overwhelm enemy defenses. Queen Zikra felt the collective fear of her species as the calculations completed. Even if they sent every fighter they had, the humans could simply make them all disappear with those reality-bending weapons. For the first time in their species' history, the Krish considered the possibility of extinction. The crystalline beings of Nexar had watched galactic conflicts for 800 years without taking sides. They lived on worlds made of living crystal. Their bodies formed from the same materials as their planets. War was foreign to them. They had always believed their remote location and peaceful nature would protect them from any threat. Elder Resonance, the oldest of their kind, felt vibrations of fear ripple through the crystal networks. The harmony is broken, she sang in tones that made the very ground shimmer. These humans bring chaos to the natural order. For the first time in centuries, the Nexari began growing defensive structures. Their crystal cities started producing weapons platforms that could channel stellar energy into focused beams. If the peaceful Nexari were preparing for war, the situation was truly desperate. Back on Lunar Station orbiting Earth's moon, Admiral Kyungmin Lee sat in the command center, monitoring the galaxy's reaction to their demonstration. Banks of screens showed intercepted communications from dozens of alien civilizations. His intelligence staff worked around the clock, translating and analyzing the flood of panicked messages. Commander So Young Choi approached with a fresh report, her face grim. "Sir, it's getting worse by the hour. The Vorthak Empire just declared a state of military emergency. They're recalling all their ships from frontier sectors." "What about the smaller powers?" Lee asked, studying a holographic map of the galaxy that showed fleet movements in real time. Red dots indicated military buildups, and there were far too many of them. The Aquatic Collective is moving their deep space habitats to remote sectors. The avian republics are fortifying their nesting worlds. Even the machine intelligence of the Copper Syndicate is upgrading their defensive protocols. So Young paused, pulling up another display. "Sir, we're tracking over 300 separate fleet movements, species that haven't talked to each other in millennia are suddenly sharing intelligence." Lee rubbed his temples. When they'd agreed to demonstrate human technology, the goal had been to establish humanity as a legitimate player in galactic politics. Instead, they'd triggered the largest military mobilization in recorded history. On the trading world of Commerce Station, normally bustling markets fell silent as news of the human demonstration spread. Merchants from hundreds of species gathered around public displays, watching the footage with growing alarm. The Kalari trader Silkvan, whose family had operated shipping routes for generations, felt his tentacles quiver with fear. "If the humans can destroy anything they want," he whispered to his Vorthak business partner, "what's to stop them from taking over all our trade routes?" Similar conversations were happening across thousands of worlds. The galaxy's economy depended on a delicate balance between different species and their territories. If one group suddenly became powerful enough to take whatever they wanted, the entire system would collapse. The mechanical beings of the Copper Syndicate processed the information with cold logic. Their massive factory ships began producing new weapons at unprecedented rates, their robotic workers toiling endlessly to create defenses against the human threat. But even their advanced AI systems couldn't calculate a reliable defense against technology that seemed to ignore the known laws of physics. In the depths of space, ancient species that had hidden themselves from galactic civilization for millennia began stirring. The void touched. Energy beings that existed between dimensions felt the ripples of fear spreading across the galaxy. Some whispered that perhaps it was time to return to the physical realm and restore balance. Admiral Lee watched the reports pile up on his desk. Fleet buildups, emergency alliances, weapons manufacturing at levels not seen since the last Galactic War, all because of one 5-minute demonstration. "Commander," he said quietly, "I think we may have just started something we can't stop." So Young looked at the galaxy map, now showing red warning indicators across almost every major system. "Sir, what do we do?" Lee stared at the display for a long moment. Fear was indeed spreading faster than light itself, and humanity found itself at the center of a storm that threatened to engulf the entire galaxy. The question now was whether they could weather what was coming, or if their demonstration of power had just painted a target on every human world in the universe. The massive Grand Assembly Hall on Kepler Station had been built to accommodate the galaxy's most important diplomatic meetings, but nothing like this had ever happened before. The circular chamber, normally used for trade negotiations and border disputes, now housed the largest gathering of alien species in recorded history. Representatives from over 200 civilizations filled the tiered seating, their various forms creating a bizarre tapestry of shapes, colors, and sizes. At the center of it all, the Vorthak Empire's Supreme Commander Thexlar stood at the main podium, his dark scales gleaming under the chamber's lights. Behind him, arranged in a semicircle, sat the most powerful leaders in the galaxy. The insectoid hive queen Zithra clicked her mandibles nervously while her compound eyes tracked every movement in the room. The crystalline elder resonance hummed at frequencies that made nearby metal objects vibrate. Even the mechanical representatives of the Copper Syndicate had sent their most advanced AI units, their red optical sensors scanning constantly. What made this gathering truly unprecedented wasn't just the number of species present, it was who was sitting together. The Kalari Federation and the Aquatic Collective had been at war for 3 decades, yet their ambassadors now shared the same row. The proud avian republics, who considered themselves superior to all ground-dwelling species, sat quietly next to the underground dwellers of the Mole Consortium. Ancient blood feuds and territorial disputes had been set aside in the face of a greater threat. Ambassador Dong-Hyun Lim sat alone at a small table in the center of the chamber, representing all of humanity. He was a thin man in his 50s, wearing a simple dark blue diplomatic uniform that looked almost plain compared to the elaborate garments and biomodifications of the alien representatives. His calm expression gave no hint of the pressure he was under, as hundreds of eyes, sensors, and other sensory organs focused on him. Behind the main chamber, visible through reinforced transparent walls, the space around Kepler Station was filled with warships. The coalition had brought an impressive display of force, over 3,000 vessels from dozens of different species. Vorthak dreadnoughts hung in space like floating cities, their weapon batteries tracking every movement. Kalari, interceptor squadrons patrolled in perfect formations, their energy shields creating cascading light shows. The Krish had brought their entire war swarm, thousands of small fighters that moved like a living cloud around the station. Commander Thexelar activated the chamber's translation system, his words instantly converted into hundreds of different languages and communication methods. We are here today to address the greatest threat our galaxy has ever faced. The humans have demonstrated technology that makes all our defenses obsolete. If we do nothing, they could conquer us all. A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Aquatic Collective's representative, a being that existed in a mobile water tank, sent electrical pulses through the liquid to show support. The machine minds of the Copper Syndicate processed the statement and found it logical. Therefore, Thexelar continued, we have drafted the Galactic Security Accord. This document will ensure that no single species can threaten the stability of our civilization. The terms were projected on holographic displays throughout the chamber. Dong-Hyun read them carefully, his expression never changing. The coalition wanted humanity to surrender all advanced military technology, submit to inspections by alien oversight committees, and accept monitoring stations in every human system. In return, humanity would be granted protected status and allowed to continue existing under galactic supervision. Queen Zythera's voice buzzed through the chamber's speakers. The humans have 48 hours to comply with these reasonable terms. If they refuse, we will have no choice but to implement a complete economic blockade of human space. The threat was clear. Humanity depended on trade with alien civilizations for many raw materials and technologies. Cut off from galactic commerce, human worlds would slowly starve. Elder Resonance added her harmonic voice to the ultimatum. Military. Intervention remains an option if diplomatic solutions fail. The safety of the galaxy cannot be compromised by one species' ambitions. Dong-Hyun finally spoke, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber despite its normal tone. I understand the coalition's concerns. However, I need to clarify something important. Humanity developed our technology for exploration and defense, not conquest. We have no desire to threaten anyone. Commander Thexelar's scales darkened with anger. Your desires are irrelevant. You have the power to destroy us all. That alone makes you a threat. The alien representatives erupted in voices, clicks, hums, and electronic signals of agreement. They had convinced themselves that humanity's mere existence was dangerous. The fact that humans had never attacked anyone didn't matter. They could attack, and that was enough. Outside the station, Captain Sujin Park stood on the bridge of the New Soul, humanity's escort vessel. The ship looked tiny compared to the alien fleet surrounding it. Her crew of 25 humans worked quietly at their stations, monitoring the thousands of weapons pointed in their direction. Captain, her communications officer reported, we're receiving targeting locks from at least 50 different ships. They're not even trying to hide their intentions. Sujin nodded calmly. Let them lock on. Are our systems ready? Standing by on your orders, ma'am. Back in the assembly hall, Dong-Hyun stood to address the coalition. I appreciate the time you've given us to consider your proposal. However, I must respectfully decline on behalf of humanity. The chamber fell silent. Even the constant background hum of life support systems seemed to pause. Commander Thexela's voice was deadly quiet. You refuse. We refuse to surrender our sovereignty based on fear and speculation. Humanity has committed no crimes against the galactic community. We will not submit to punishment for abilities we've never misused. The coalition representatives exploded into angry debate. Some called for immediate military action. Others demanded economic sanctions. A few suggested that humanity was bluffing and would cave under pressure. Dong Hyun waited for the noise to die down before speaking again. However, I do have a counter-proposal. The chamber quieted, curious despite their anger. Humanity is willing to share defensive technology with allied species and establish joint research programs. We can work together to face real threats instead of creating imaginary ones. Commander Thexela's laugh was like grinding metal. You think you can negotiate from a position of weakness? You have one ship here, human. We have thousands. Dong Hyun smiled slightly. Numbers aren't everything, Commander. Outside the station, something impossible happened. Space itself seemed to shimmer around the new soul, and suddenly it wasn't alone anymore. 12 more human vessels materialized out of nothing, their quantum stealth systems disengaging simultaneously. The coalition fleet found themselves surrounded by ships they hadn't even known were there. The aliens believed they held all the cards. They were about to learn that humans had been playing a completely different game. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Humanity respectfully declines. Ambassador Dong Hyun Lim's calm voice carried across the Grand Assembly Hall, reaching every corner where alien representatives sat in stunned silence for exactly 3 seconds. Then chaos erupted. Commander Thexela's scales turned almost black with rage as he slammed his massive fist on the podium. "For you dare refuse the combined will of the galaxy?" His voice boomed through the translation systems, causing several smaller species to cover their hearing organs. Queen Zithra's mandibles clicked furiously as she rose from her seat, her arms gesturing wildly. "Insolent humans, you have sealed your own fate." Her compound eyes glowed with an angry red light as pheromones of aggression filled her section of the chamber. The crystalline Elder Resonance's harmonic voice cracked with fury, creating discordant notes that made the metal walls vibrate ominously. "This defiance cannot stand. The natural order must be preserved." Even the normally emotionless AI representatives of the Copper Syndicate displayed signs of agitation, their optical sensors flashing rapidly as they processed this unexpected turn of events. One of them spoke in a cold, mechanical voice. Probability of compliance was calculated at 97%. This outcome requires immediate recalculation of all strategic parameters. Dong Hyun remained seated calmly at his small table, his hands folded in front of him as hundreds of alien voices rose in anger. Threats flew from every direction: economic destruction, military conquest, complete isolation from galactic civilization. Some species called for immediate bombardment of human worlds, while others demanded that humanity be stripped of their spacefaring technology entirely. The Aquatic Collective's representative sent violent electrical pulses through their tank, creating a light show of fury. The Avian Republic's ambassador spread their massive wings in a threat display that would have been impressive if they weren't already trapped in the assembly hall. Even the peaceful Luminar began glowing with agitated energy patterns. Captain Sujin Park watched the chaos unfold through the secure communication link to the assembly hall. Her bridge crew remained at their stations, professional and calm despite the thousands of alien weapons pointed at their ship. The coalition fleet had moved into attack formation the moment Dong Hyun delivered his refusal, their various weapon systems charging and targeting computers locked onto the lone human vessel. "Captain," her tactical officer reported quietly, "we're reading energy spikes from the entire coalition fleet. They're preparing to fire." Sujin nodded, her expression never changing. She lifted her communication device and spoke in a voice so quiet that only her crew could hear. "Execute Revelation Protocol." The response was immediate and impossible. Space around Kepler Station began to shimmer like heat waves rising from hot pavement. The coalition fleet sensors, some of the most advanced in the galaxy, suddenly detected energy signatures that hadn't been there moments before. Vorthak tactical officers stared at their displays in confusion as new contacts appeared on their screens. Kalari sensor specialists recalibrated their equipment, certain there had to be a malfunction. Then 15 human warships materialized out of nothing. The Unity's shield, flagship of the human fleet, appeared directly above Kepler Station like a guardian angel. Twice the size of the New Sol and bristling with the same quantum technology that had terrified the galaxy, it hung in space with quiet menace. Around it, 14 other vessels took up positions in a perfect defensive formation, their sleek hulls reflecting the light of nearby stars. The Coalition fleet found themselves surrounded. Inside the assembly hall, alien representatives pressed against the observation windows, watching in disbelief as the human ships revealed themselves. These vessels had been there all along, invisible to every sensor, hidden by technology that made their stealth capabilities look like children's toys. Admiral Won-Ho Kim's voice broadcast across every communication channel in the system, calm and measured despite the tension. To all Coalition forces, this is Admiral Kim of the Terran Defense Force. We came to this station in peace, and we remain committed to peaceful resolution of this crisis. His words carried the weight of absolute authority. Unlike the alien commanders who had spent the past hour making threats and demands, Kim spoke with the quiet confidence of someone who held all the real power in the situation. However, he continued, we will not surrender our freedom to appease fears based on speculation and prejudice. Humanity has committed no crimes against the galactic community. We will not submit to punishment for abilities we have never misused. The Coalition fleet hesitated, their attack formation suddenly looking far less impressive. Military advisors aboard the alien ships ran frantic calculations, their computers struggling to process the implications of what they were seeing. If the humans had been hiding 15 advanced warships, how many more might there be? How long had they been watching and listening to Coalition communications? Commander Thexelar's voice crackled over the communication channels, his earlier confidence replaced by uncertainty. This changes nothing. You are still outnumbered 50-1. Admiral Kim's response was measured and clear. Numbers mean nothing when you can't hit your target, Commander. Our demonstration at Nexus Prime showed what our defensive protocols can do. Would you like to see our offensive capabilities? The threat hung in space between the two fleets like a sword, suspended by a thread. The Coalition forces had superior numbers, but the humans had technology that seemed to ignore the laws of physics. Every tactical computer in the alien fleet was showing the same terrifying result. Engagement probability near zero, survival probability even lower. Inside the assembly hall, the alien representatives had fallen silent. They watched through the observation windows as their massive fleet faced off against 15 human ships that had appeared from nowhere. The balance of power had shifted in an instant and everyone knew it. Queen Zithra's voice buzzed with frustrated anger. This is exactly why you must be stopped. You hide among us like parasites, watching and waiting to strike. We hide because you force us to, Admiral Kim replied. We tried transparency at Nexus Prime and you responded with ultimatums and threats. We offered cooperation and you demanded surrender. What choice did you leave us? The Coalition fleet remained in attack. Formation. Weapons charged and ready, but no one gave the order to fire. The alien commanders found themselves in an impossible situation. They had come here to force humanity into submission through overwhelming force, but now they faced the very real possibility of starting a war they couldn't win. Captain Su Jin looked at her tactical display, watching as targeting computers on both sides locked onto enemy vessels. Hundreds of ships hung in space around Kepler Station, their weapons ready to unleash destruction on a scale not seen in centuries. Ma'am, her communications officer reported, we're receiving stand-down orders from multiple Coalition vessels. Their commanders are requesting new instructions from their governments. Su Jin nodded grimly. Maintain position and keep all systems ready. This isn't over yet. She was right. The standoff had begun, and neither side seemed willing to back down. The question now was whether cooler heads would prevail, or if the galaxy was about to witness the first shots of a war that could destroy everything they had built. In the cold vacuum of space, human and alien ships faced each other across the void, waiting for someone to blink first. The massive fleets hung in space like floating cities of death. Human ships bristled with quantum disruptors, while alien vessels formed defensive walls around their homeworlds. Everyone expected the biggest war in galactic history to begin any moment. Captain Jamin Han stood on the bridge of the Iron Phoenix, watching the tactical displays. His crew was ready. The quantum weapons were charged. All they needed was one wrong move from either side. Then the sensors went crazy. "Captain, we're detecting massive energy signatures approaching from dark space," reported Lieutenant Chen, her voice tight with fear. "These readings, they're off the charts." The view screen shifted to show the edge of the system. Space itself seemed to tear open as something emerged from the void between galaxies. The ships that came through were unlike anything anyone had ever seen. They were black as the space between stars, their hulls rippling like liquid metal. They moved with deadly grace, ignoring all laws of physics. "What are those things?" whispered someone on the bridge. The answer came from Admiral Korath's flagship, through emergency channels. His voice carried pure terror. "Ancient archives, the Void Reapers, machines from before our civilizations existed. They feed on stellar energy. They've been sleeping in dark space for millions of years." The alien Coalition forces moved first. Their massive dreadnoughts opened fire with plasma cannons and particle beams. The weapons struck the strange ships and simply disappeared, absorbed into their adaptive hulls. The Void Reapers didn't even slow down. What happened next lasted only minutes, but felt like hours. The ancient machines unleashed weapons that turned matter itself into energy. Coalition ships vanished in brilliant flashes. Others were torn apart by gravity weapons that twisted space around them. The proud fleets that had gathered to fight humanity were being slaughtered. A massive Tellurian battlecruiser tried to ram one of the Reapers. The alien ship simply passed through the enemy hull like it wasn't there, emerging from the other side, as the battlecruiser broke apart in slow motion. "All human vessels." "This is Captain Han," Jamin's voice cut through the chaos on all frequencies. "Engage the Reapers immediately, protect the survivors." Some of his officers looked shocked. "Sir, they're our enemies." "Why should we?" "Because if we don't stop these things, there won't be anyone left to be enemies with," Han snapped. "All ships, attack Formation Delta. Target the lead Reaper." The human fleet moved as one. Their quantum disruptors fired in. Perfect coordination. The purple energy beams struck the nearest Void Reaper, and something unexpected happened. The ancient machine's hull flickered and sparked. Pieces of its liquid metal skin began to peel away. "Direct hit, we're hurting them," shouted the weapons officer. For the first time in millions of years, the Void Reapers had found something that could damage them. The quantum disruptors worked by tearing apart the fundamental forces that held matter together. Even their adaptive technology couldn't defend against that. The battle turned into a nightmare of survival. Human ships darted between the massive Reapers, hitting them with quantum bursts, while alien evacuation ships fled the system. The Iron Phoenix led a group of destroyers in a desperate attack run on the largest Reaper. They managed to cripple one of its weapon arrays before two human ships were vaporized by return fire. Admiral Korath's voice crackled through the comm system. "Human vessels, we're evacuating our civilian populations. Can you hold them off?" "We'll buy you the time you need," Han replied, even as another explosion rocked his ship. "Get your people out of here." The fighting was brutal. The Void Reapers adapted quickly, their hulls becoming more resistant to the quantum weapons with each hit. But they were ancient machines, and their programming hadn't encountered resistance in eons. They made mistakes. Commander Yuki Tanaka aboard the heavy cruiser Stormbreaker noticed the pattern first. "Captain Han, they're vulnerable during their charging sequence. Right before they fire their main weapons, their shields drop for 3 seconds. All ships, coordinate your attacks. Wait for the charging sequence, then hit them with everything." The human fleet began working together like a single organism. They would scatter when the Reapers charged their weapons, then converge for devastating attacks during those brief, vulnerable moments. Ship after ship made suicide runs to protect the evacuation fleet. The tide turned when the Reapers realized they were taking too much damage. These weren't the helpless prey they remembered from their last awakening. These new creatures fought back with weapons that could actually hurt them. The ancient machines began to retreat toward dark space. But they moved slowly, dragging their damaged hulls away from the quantum fire. The human fleet pursued them to the edge of the system, making sure they kept running. When the shooting finally stopped, the cost was terrible. Half the human fleet was gone. Most of the coalition forces had been destroyed in the first minutes of battle, but somehow, impossibly, they had won. In the days that followed, everything changed. Former enemies worked together to rescue survivors from damaged ships. Coalition medics treated wounded human sailors. Human engineers helped repair alien vessels. Admiral Korath found Captain Han in the medical bay of a Tellurian hospital ship, getting treatment for radiation burns. The alien leader looked older than his years. "Your people saved us all," Korath said quietly. "Those weapons we feared so much. They were the only thing standing between us and extinction." Han nodded. "Slowly. The galaxy's a dangerous place. Maybe we're stronger together than apart." The treaty signed months later wasn't about surrender or domination. It was about survival. Humanity would serve as the galaxy's guardians against threats from beyond the stars. In return, the other species would share their knowledge, their resources and their friendship. The quantum disruptors that had once terrified entire civilizations now protected them. Human ships patrolled the dark space between galaxies, watching for any sign of the Void Reaper's return. Sometimes the thing that scares you most becomes the thing that saves you. In a universe full of ancient horrors and cosmic threats, the galaxy had found its protectors in the most unlikely place. The stars were safer now, guarded by those who had once been feared above all others.